Welcome. On today's video, we've got former BTCC driver Mike Epps. Thanks for joining us. I know you've been busy with redecorating your house that I saw on Facebook. Looks great. And obviously with your esports stuff as well. So like I say, thanks for giving us some time today.
No problem, man. Nice to meet you.
Thank you. So I want to take the viewers through a bit of a Mike Epps story, if you like, before we arrive at the British Touring Cars. So growing up as a kid, at what point does like a baby Mike Epps go, do you know what? I love racing and this is what I want to do when I grow up?
Cool. I have to almost go back through a lot of memories to dig up these sort of stories now, because it's actually that long ago. It used to be a fresh story, but actually it was a while now. I did start a bit later than others. I must have been 12 or 13 when that kind of reality of actually competing in karting and motorsport properly came to life. I always played car games on the PS2 and like Midnight Run, Need for Speed, and Gran Turismo, especially. Like they were all the things I played. I've got to shout out. I even played the Token 97 game back on PlayStation 1, or was it? Not even sure, but it might have even been on my PC. I'm not sure, but I remember Tiffany Dale's voice, and it was 1997. And I knew about it from then, even though I wasn't quite sure of everything at the time. Who would have known that, 15, 20 years later, I'd actually race one, which is crazy. But yeah, I used to go birthday karting and all that stuff with friends, loads of that. And I was always, trying to beat everyone. And my friends said I need to get out more when they saw me play the racing games and stuff. They said, you're just way too quick, way too good at this. And a guy called Rob Hanscom at Rye House actually said to my dad, you should buy him a kart. You should get him a go-kart and go do some proper racing. The kid's not too bad. He looks all right. And obviously Rob was probably trying to sell a kart for his shop at the time, but little did he know I'd actually be racing for his race team in karting for the next 3 to 4 years. So yeah, that day, Dad bought a kart. I got bought a license pack and all that stuff to do my training down at Buckmore Park in Kent, and became a licensed kart racing driver when I was 13, I suppose. Did my novice races, and then went from there. 5 or 6 years of karting, and then we moved up to cars.
Yeah, that's cool. So when you start in karting, was there like a beginning dream or goal, if you like? Did you sit and go, I want to be in Formula One, I want to go IndyCar, or whatever the case may be?
I think, if I'm honest, I feel like kids that have that dream from such a young age have probably been taught that dream by their parents. Not always, but I would say they at least had an influence, if that makes sense. Whereas my family had no motorsport connection or ambition or anything before I started. So I don't think I really realized those ambitions initially. And I wasn't this child prodigy that's aiming to be the next Lewis Hamilton from 10. I didn't really figure out what I wanted to do until I was further into it. And of course, I did watch Formula One. I watched Le Mans and all of that, and had little visions of myself being in it, but hadn't quite got the determined I want to be there thing at the early ages. And then I stepped into cars, and it became a lot more real. So yeah, I wouldn't say I had that crazy ambition to start with, and my family certainly are probably the reason for that, and it's not their fault. They just weren't in it. I realized this as I grew up through motorsport, that a lot of these guys I was racing against, their dads had already done it. They'd been through the whole thing prior to that, and they were gifting all their experience and knowledge they had learned down to their kids. And without that, it is a much steeper hill to climb. So no, it's a strange one, really. I don't really know how to get into it. I was into train sets and stuff when I was a really early kid. And then suddenly, it was just petrol and the smell of two-stroke, tyres, grip, sore necks, and sore arms in karting as well.
So yeah, it's an interesting story because, like I say, it's so different from the normal race drives that we see on the touring car group. Like, I'm sure in a few years' time we'll see some sons of racers at the moment appearing and family a lot into it. But also, when you went into car racing, it wasn't a British touring car route that you took, so to speak, because you see like guys go through F4 or Ginetta Juniors, then up to Clios. But you took a bit of a different route up to the touring cars. So do you mind just running us through quickly your car racing career until you got to touring cars?
I'd say my career is really one of several paths, of which they all, I think it doesn't matter where you go, you'll end up somewhere. You might end up where you were looking to go. You might end up in something completely different, which is probably my case. I think I was following a bit of a dream to head towards IndyCar when I was younger. I was going up the single seater path because I loved flat out corners, high aero grip. That was what I enjoyed driving on a game, and so the real life approach was the same. Naturally, you head towards that. You're kind of brainwashed into thinking you want to go to F1 by everyone else wanting to go into F1 when you grow up into motorsport anyway, a little bit. So I took that route and went Formula V to start with. That was really the first step out from karting. It's like a Formula Ford, but slightly slower. A VW Beetle engine and an old steel frame chassis and some proper hard Dunlop tyres. But it was actually cheaper than the season of karting we'd done the year before, which really says something about the expense of karting right now. And we weren't even spending that much money on it. So it was for us almost like a tea break at the same time as moving into cars. And all the tracks are bigger. There's nice cafes. It's just, me and Dad looked at each other at the first round and we were like, this is better, isn't it? We're out of that little bubble now and we're into this big world of motorsport and proper race circuits with just, big establishments behind them. Went into Formula Renault the year after. I'd come second in Formula V, and a friend of mine, Ash Sutton, had done Formula V the year before. So it was kind of quite a good, it just looked like, well, he was going to go somewhere. And he was certainly a name in karting. So I thought, well, maybe it is a series that we can look at doing. And we did. Did Formula Renault Bark the year after. And that's where we had a tougher season because we ran with a cheaper, less experienced team, really for the sake of getting on the grid in the first place and not to lose out, because we were struggling to muster the sort of larger budgets required for the steps we were taking forward. A guy who just lives, funnily enough, down the road from me now, he's good friends, Martin Pott. He ran a company called P1 Sports, which is like a driver management thing, and he was at the Silverstone round at the TOCA event in 2012, which was actually my first round on the TOCA package, technically, a long time ago now. And I came fourth, I think, out of 28 or so cars. We had Seb Morris, Josh Webster. We had lots of names were competing in it that year. And in fact, the field was probably twice the depth of the actual full Formula Renault UK series, which died out a year later. So it was a really, really condensed pack of talent. Scott Malvern, there's literally names that are now big in UK motorsport scene were all racing in that year, in that championship. And I was managing to put the car up there in the top sort of five. And he offered me a different view to racing and said, let's go over to America. Let's race in USF 2000, Prime Mazda, Indy Lights, IndyCar, racing around the Indy 500 by 2017, something like that. We had this kind of view and this little train track that we were trying to head down through the scholarship program that they had in America called the Mazda Road to Indy. And that really does help because you literally win hundreds of thousands of dollars in funding for winning the championship on the previous step. There's nothing like that in the UK at all. So for me, it was like, right, this is the only route. We tried sponsorship and we tried to get, large sums of money. But it's really quite hard to do unless you have a lot of business leverage in your own family, I think. So for us, it was a challenge. And at the time we thought, right, let's do this. We had some success. It took a little while to find it in the first season in 2013. And then 2014, we had a lot more success, but we ran into budget problems again and all sorts of other issues. And it resulted in me taking 2014 pretty much out of the seat. So I sort of disappeared off the motorsport ladder for a bit and didn't really talk to anyone, went into a bit of depression, to be honest with you, and took a job elsewhere, completely out of motorsport, and then made a return in 2015. And this is the switch from in single seaters to tin types, I guess, where Tony Gillam, who had been friends with on Facebook for a few years anyway, a friend of mine, Howard Fuller, had raced with his car in touring cars in 2012 when I was there on the Toka package. So I was well aware of his team and what he was doing, but I'd never really spoken to him. And then he said, well, we've got VW Cup. They're like 280 horsepower, slick tyres, quite quick, a bit quicker than Clio's. British GT package. We do one round at Spa-Francorchamps. And this was in February 2015. We were talking really, really close to the season. And I thought, you know what? Okay, let's have a look. And we looked at the whole deal, and it was more than doable. And again, something like a bit of a tea break from the cost of the single-seater racing we'd been doing before. So we thought maybe this would be a nice way to take a step back in and see what happens. We then won 4 or 5 races that year. I didn't finish every round. We had a few mechanical problems, as comes with various seasons of racing. And then, you know, before we knew it, there was a touring car offer on the table, and it was obviously a fairly shoelace outfit sort of deal. You know, the budget was made for us, if that makes sense. It wasn't necessarily, you know, a full sort of touring car budget cost, to be honest. It was quite cheap, relatively. And, you know, it didn't seem real at first. I was thinking, Jesus Christ, I'm going to be a touring car driver. You know, looking back on it, there's a lot of people that have since, you know, dipped their toe into the touring car field as well. And it's become a little bit of a musical chairs situation, which I'm not that fond of. Because I think at the pinnacle of the sport, you tend to want to have your solid characters constantly returning, rather than this little bit of a merry-go-round situation where random drivers are just coming in and out. And I'm all for that as well, because the opportunity for those individual drivers is great to experience touring cars and have a go. But I think, on a bit of a tangent here, but yeah, the budget for touring cars is so extortionate to be competitive that is kind of the result now. We have a lot of dipping in and out because people can't really manage to do full seasons, or they can afford to do a couple of rounds. And guys like Tony will be more than happy to offer that opportunity to people as well, and other teams, as we've seen. So it really, you know, there was no particular plan set for the entirety of my career, which sounds a little bit, you know, not the best thought through scenario. But I think sometimes you can have a plan and you don't end up sticking to it anyway. I'd say most drivers I know had a set plan early on. They haven't. It's not gone to plan at all. They've ended up in completely different situations. But you just have to. You have to play every situation out as best as you can and see where you end up. So it's been, like you say, it's been an interesting career of sort of over here, over there. Where am I going? Who knows? But it's given me a very broad knowledge of lots of different types of racing and racing cars and how to go about that, which has given me a really nice foundation to become an all-round driver coach that can earn money coaching people in nearly anything, to be honest, because at some point in my career I've driven something like that, and I've always been right there at sort of the sharp end of the timesheets in anything I drive, as long as it's competitive. So it's been a strange career, and now with everything that's happening in the world in the past sort of 18 months, it's certainly put a lot of us on the sidelines, including myself. But it has opened opportunities in the esports world, which actually could then open opportunities to come back into the real world. So, like you say, if I'd had a set plan 2 years ago, I wouldn't have been sticking to it through COVID-19, would I? Let's be honest. So
it's quite nice way that you didn't have a plan, so to speak. I know it sounds a bit silly, but you find some young drivers that have got like this tunnel vision saying, I am going to Formula One, and then perhaps touring car seat, which could lead to something else, and whatever the case is. So, but bring it back to when you start with Team Hard, so you was driving the events in the CC. Up to that, you've been in like spec series or single make series. So, going into the touring cars, how is it different in general? Obviously, it's a lot more of a bigger operation. But secondly, the variables like saloons against hatchbacks at certain circuits, front-wheel drive against rear-wheel drive. What is that like? And when you go into it, you're sat there on the grid with first the other nutcases, let's be fair, by the first corner. What is that like for a new driver?
It was interesting for sure. Obviously, the difference in terms of its specification is that up to a certain point, there is an open plan to what you do. So you choose your chassis, your car. You can fabricate that however you like to fit the spec parts. As an example, from the bulkhead forward, it's pretty much the same, any touring car. That entire front engine placement, cage, everything, suspension assembly, the lot is all spec in a unit from RML at the moment. And same with the rear. I like to call it the rear box more than anything, because it literally looks like a cage, like a box cage underneath the rear of the car, where all the rear suspension assembly is bolted into. So there's a lot more open in the way of how you can design your car initially, but then once it's designed and it's put on the floor, you're that's where you are. Then you're on the same platform as everyone else in terms of what you can change mostly. But then you have different engine manufacturers. So you have Swindon, you have Neil Brown, Maltune. So you have different, and they're all competing against each other, and they're all, revealing some of their interests and techniques to each team. And so you have that side of things as well. So you learn to work with lots of groups of people, and you obviously have a tire guy who you have one. I think we had one member of Dunlop staff per team, or potentially per 2 cars. I can't remember. His name was Adrian, and I worked with him massively on developing our setup and making things work, just paying attention to tire temperature spreads and all sorts of stuff. And there's a lot of stuff I'd done previously through various engineers in various racing series, but this was really wrapping it all into one. And you really do have a group of 15 to 20 people around you that you kind of go through to put this entire thing together. And given that, and I've said this before in another podcast, I'm not actually sure if it's above board, but my first laps in a British touring car were in free practice session 2 at Brands Indy of that race weekend. So yeah, my very literally there's a lot of guys that have come in 2020 and 2019 and say, oh, we've had very little experience of the car, but they've at least had a test day before their actual weekend. I had 0 laps, so I literally went out. FP1, the car was still being essentially, fabricated and fully finished, ready for track, because it was the most last minute. In hindsight, it was way too last minute, but I grew from it, I suppose. I certainly learned how to adapt quickly. But yeah, that very first race and first qualifying session was, an eye-opener. And obviously I was way off the pace I would have liked to have been, because I was still just adapting to everything around me and learning to drive. Luckily, I had Jake Hill, who had done, a nice sort of bit of pre-season testing. He'd also already dipped into touring cars a year or 2 before with Motorbase. So I had some good data to refer myself off of. And by the end of that weekend, I was more or less on his pace. So it was, exciting. It's loud. It's like driving. How do I explain it? There's no soundproofing at all in a touring car. Every single bang and crunch and everything. It's like putting your ear in a tin and scrunching it up. You hear every single noise. You get a door bang to the side, and it's a bang. It's a proper noise inside the car, and it's crisp as well. It's really like all the pops and bangs from the exhaust, the whole lot. It is right there, and it's harsh, and it's I think I remember the day Jade Edwards first drove a touring car. I was at Snetterton, and she got a few laps, luckily, to drive. I think it was Jake's old car or my old car that was out as a 2-seater for a track day. And she came in and went, "Oh my God." And she'd been racing Clios, but she had never experienced that sort of level of noise and just general experience. It's like when you come off a roller coaster when you get out of the car, which is really exciting. And for me, with cars surrounding me, hounding me. You're getting, hit up the back. You're getting hit around the side, and you have to be on it. And I got eaten up a little bit initially, but you get your elbows out and you get used to it. You're not going to stand there and get punched in the face for too long before you start hitting back, are you?
Yeah.
But yeah, it's really exciting.
Yeah, I was like to say, presumably the racing style is a lot different than the open wheel stuff, because if you touch an open wheel car, you just go that way. Whereas you're more protected in a touring car, so it's obviously a lot different style for you. When
you learn to lean on people.
A couple of seasons you've had, who would you say stood out as a driver, whether it be on or off the track?
Stood out as a driver, obviously. I mean, the common answer would be Sutton, but I would back that quite a lot, because he is an incredibly flamboyant and fast driver on track. It's simple as, and it's not like he only has one mode, but he just always wrings the neck out of the car. He's a lot more technical than people probably give him credit for outside of his bubble, because if you're ever near him on a track walk, you'll hear him talking about intricate diff settings and all sorts of stuff. So he's well and truly on it, and as an all-round driver, I think he's great. I'd shout out to Jake Hill as well, because he's clearly starting to show himself now. Me and him certainly fought over the inter-team sort of battle between teammates, and whoever qualified highest and whoever got the best result in the team, because it was kind of our choice at the time. When you're struggling to get in the top 15 at some points, then you at least want to beat your teammate. So, and he always had the measure of me on a qualifying lap. Certainly had that 10th that I had to really push for sometimes. So those two guys. I wonder who's new. I've got to say Bushell, Mike as well, friend of mine really. He's another one who really deserves a spot there all day long, and it's just clear to see that money is what keeps you in that circus and nothing else really. Because he's got a fantastic engineering brain. I've seen some of the stuff he's designed in the background, and obviously he can get in the seat and drive the pants off the car as well. So yeah, those three guys are very impressive. I think I'd imagine all three of them will see them at some point in the future, including Mike, do something pretty cool. So
yeah, so I certainly hope so, because when he got that run out last season, I think it was at Knock Hill, and he just got absolutely shafted basically all three races. I was gutted for him, because he is a really he didn't really get the opportunity. And like I say, it's a shame that money talks, because I think obviously got to put it nicely, but I think there are a few seats that are potentially wasted. I think that's probably the nicest way of putting it. But again, it's what it comes down to, unfortunately. So staying on the, if I was to say to you now, like, I've got an unlimited budget, go out there and get me a car to race next season, you're in the first seat, picking A as a car and second as a teammate.
There's so many good cars now, but I'd probably say I'd go for a BM. I'd go for the Beamer, because I think that thing's, they've tried to slow that down, and it's still there. And also, I miss rear wheel drive a bit, so I'd love to actually do touring cars with a rear wheel drive car, and properly, qualifying lap really feels like a qualifying lap in a rear wheel drive car. You put the throttle down and the arse comes out. It's none of this sort of sketchy front wheel drive business where it's kind of, it was really hard to get used to when I first drove a front wheel drive car, because it's just all backwards. It's all completely the opposite. And there are certain inputs that are just, hardwired from your brain to your foot. And you have to undo those and turn them back around when you switch from a front to a rear wheel drive car. So I'd have a BMW, and any driver in touring cars, or from anywhere.
We'll do both. We'll run a free car team.
I think, God, he'd probably beat me though. Sutton. I don't know. It might be a boring answer to say him again, but I mean, I've never seen him drive the Beamer, and I imagine he would do some impressive things with WSR. So, yeah, I think it would be a BMW 3 Series. We'd run that for a couple more years, and team up with Ash, mainly because even if I don't get a result, he definitely would. Do you see what I mean? So certainly. And then across the whole world, that's really difficult to choose. I actually couldn't choose one. I'd have to choose. I'm trying to think of someone I raced that I would want to be teammates with, but every person you come up with, you're like, but what would they be like in this situation? So I don't know. I'm going to leave that one unanswered, actually, because I think there's easily 30 or 40 guys I know, some of which race and some who don't race anymore, that would be fantastic as a teammate.
That would get 30 or 40 PBLs off Alan Gow, to be fair. So probably a fair shout. So bringing it to 2017, so the second season that you had in, you pretty well, to be fair. A little bit of rotten luck mid-season, a couple of DNFs and that. But considering the car perhaps wasn't the most competitive on the grid, again, I think that's probably fair to say.
Good in some circuits and not so good at others. Yeah.
But again, dragging some good results out of it, getting multiple points and whatnot. But at what point throughout the season, if at all, did you realise that perhaps you haven't got a drive for the following season? And what was that like, considering all the work you've put in?
I've always known, at the start of the season, that what about the next one? He's kind of, a lot of the guys obviously worked through the season, and so did I. Ideally, you'd have a 2 or 3 year plan so that you can have a year of not having to worry so much about it, which is what some guys do. But yeah, I mean, it's just stringing a thread every time. We weren't really sure if we were going to do 2017. I remember doing the last race in 2016 at Brown's GP, and it went terribly wrong. My bonnet flew up at about 130 mile an hour, smashed the windscreen, dented the roof, came in and had about half of the paddock's duct tape on the front of my car to get back out. I remember coming in sort of feeling quite emotional, because you sort of think that could have been the last time. That could have been it. It's over. It's all done. It's like the end of a holiday when you feel a bit, after like a 6-week holiday or something, and you're getting back on the plane going, oh, okay. I would say the last couple of weekends in 2017 really hit home quite a lot. I'd made some good connections throughout the year through the different sponsors that had been involved with the team and myself. And there was some positivity to come from it. There was certainly some promising things, but we were well aware that we didn't have the bulk of what was needed to carry on. And if you haven't reserved that seat, someone will take it off you like that. Like literally, there are phone calls being made 24/7. It really is like, he's got it now. Oh, they're in the seat now. Oh, apparently he's talking to that person, and that team's talking to them. It is like full on.
Yeah.
And it was around Christmas time. I couldn't get hold of. I basically had a sponsor or potential sponsor that I was really, had my fingers crossed on doing something with, just go completely cold on me. So no answer for weeks. And it sort of reached a point around the new year of 2018 where Tony had said, I'm really sorry, we're kind of done. We're all sorted. And I knew that any other team was going to be even more budget to find. So it was kind of you're staring in the face of literally financial Mount Everest. Like, you just, how the hell am I going to raise that? And just for us at the time, it was very, very difficult to even stomach, getting close. We managed to raise some money, but it just wasn't going to do that.
Yeah.
And then, it went into the lower formula, the support categories of TOCA instead as a result, which is a whole other story. But yeah, it's tough. It's very emotional, and I can understand the feeling that other people have had at the end of the season, that kind of sense of just soft sort of emotions of, this is the end of something that's been quite special. Will it happen again? Will we manage to get back next year? So it's difficult.
So bringing back to the turn out to be your last week, so you said you got a little bit of an idea that you might not be back next season. So I want to say you started the weekend, I think finished 18th, I think, worked your way up to 10th, and then got above.
Drew the ticket.
You're at the front of the grid. So last race of the season, and you have a little idea that it may be your last race as well. You sat there in first. You've got the whole gaggle of the gang behind you. What are you thinking going into that race?
So there was a lot of build-up around it because naturally, as the pole man for that race, your first pole, everyone's aware of it on TV. My phone was going mental. It was like, it was just like, oh my God, this is the moment kind of thing. It was really fitting, to be fair. I quite liked it because I was there thinking, well, could be the last one.
Yeah.
And Dad was sat there going, bloody hell, we're on pole for touring cars. And it might have been a reverse grid pole, but it's one of those experiences. It's your opportunity. And I think it's unfair to talk about reverse grid poles in touring cars when there's such a difference between the most competitive and the least competitive team on the grid. And for me, it was. Can you still hear me? Because I just muted my laptop. My bad.
Yeah.
I need to just put my hands on my lap, don't I? Right. Yeah. There were more cameras. Everyone was in the garage prior to going out, and you have this sort of half-hour period of getting ready and checking everything and making sure you've made the right changes to the car, chatting to your engineers, going through the right installation processes, blah, 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 blah. You sat there in pit lane at least 20, 25 minutes before the actual race starts. So there's a lot of build up. But sat on the grid, to be honest, I just forced myself into this sort of mental place where I'm like, all I've got to do is hit my marks. I've got to get a nice pull away, a nice launch, good release of the clutch, spot the lights early, just the same as I've done from 12th, the same as I've done from 18th. It doesn't matter. It's just the same. I'm just further up the grid. That's the best way to look at it. There was an element of, bloody hell, this is serious. But in all honesty, I'm quite, and anyone that knows me well enough knows I tend not to overreact to situations like that. Like I could see a huge shunt or a massive anything, and I'll just be like, oh, well, that was interesting. And I've sort of learned to live a bit like that because I think you can completely misread or overreact to something if you allow yourself to, and you can make something that's bad a lot worse straight away. So for me, I just kept calm, nice and chilled, bit of banter with the guys on the grid, same old sort of stuff, and just almost laughing about it. Really, I was like, this is mint, this is amazing. But also forget we were on slicks, I think, and it was raining, so it was like all of the extra bits thrown in as well. And we had a choice of new wets, into wets, I think. We definitely went for the wrong choice because it took me about 6 or 7 laps to get anywhere close to the pace of Rob Austin and the other boys. So it was a bit of a struggle and a bit of a wasted potential podium, I think. So unfortunately, it wasn't the best ending race. We still came 5th, but yeah, we were struggling terribly on the first few laps. So yeah, really exciting. But in my side of things, yeah, I got a great start and I did everything as I wanted to. So I was quite happy, really. Sometimes you have to look back and say, well, that wasn't something I could have controlled completely.
Yeah.
I had a good go, and yeah, I think we went out, with a lot of pink and white Passat on the TV screen at the front of the grid, and I've got a lovely photo on my wall downstairs of me at the front of a 30 car touring car field full of names. So yeah, it's a nice moment for me, especially again, spending a quarter of what some of these guys were probably putting into their season budgets. So to be up there and do that well was decent, and we came 8th in the independent driver standings as well. So it shows, despite having drive shaft failures and a few other issues at points where I would have potentially got another top 5 as well at Snetterton and Silverstone. Yeah, I'm quite proud to come away with the results we did.
Yeah, absolutely. They've done really well that season, to be fair. But like I say, at the end of that season, of course, it's into kind of Clio's and Ginettas after that. But going forward, what is Mike Epps going to be doing in the near future? Have you got any plans?
So there's a few things. I've I've always renewed my license every year. Maybe a bit later than normal because you're thinking, am I going to use it? I don't know, and it's more than a couple £100 to do. So you do think about that at these sort of times in life, and there are some opportunities which I'm not going to mention at the moment, but if things come off well, I might end up racing in something quite nice this year for a couple of rounds at least, and then I'll see if that goes anywhere positive after that. And it's through contacts previously in motorsport and in esports. So yeah, I'm really hoping I can make something happen out of that, but at the same time, I'm more than prepared for it not to. So I've got 3 championships. Well, 2 I'm competing in right now on the simulator game Assetto Corsa, and they are pay to enter competitions with prize funds of 5 figures. So I'm putting a lot of my time into that at the moment, and I'm aiming to win those to give myself at least some sort of financial or some sort of boost at this point in the year to carry forward with me. So I'm doing that. We'll definitely be doing some esports through the year anyway, in whatever comes up. Really enjoy that, and there's a lot of things you can do that you couldn't even have the opportunity to compete in real life. So you may as well try and simulate that as realistically as possible. If things don't go to plan on the real life front this year, then I'll probably do a couple of club races in something. I'd just stuff I've not done before. I'd do a classic Formula Ford race or MX5s, just jump in something and test myself out, see if I've still got pace, in a car, and try and get a trophy and have fun, enjoy myself, because it definitely, as soon as things get competitive, the biggest risk is you stop enjoying it. And then you're just piling money into something that makes you depressed. And that's not, I've seen a lot of guys in that position. It's not healthy long term. So for me, I'm mainly aiming to enjoy motorsport, keep my contacts, and try and push towards something in the future. But keep working on plan B at the same time. So
yeah, absolutely. I like to finish up a little bit of a light-hearted one because, of course, we always see you guys, thrashing cars around circuits in purpose-made machinery. So, what was your first car? Was it as embarrassing as some others I've heard?
I don't think it's that embarrassing. What I managed to do with it was embarrassing, but I had a 1.2 16 valve. That's the important bit. Renault Clio. I'm not even sure if it was a sport. Clio. A friend of mine at the time, who's Nathan Harrison's brother, Ryan Harrison, he also had a Renault Clio of the same shape. It was the curvy-ish shape, but not that sporty looking. So the V6 version of it, that era, that year, 2004, 2005. And if you sat on the bonnet, like you just leant on the bonnet, it would dent in and it wouldn't come back out. You'd have to open the bonnet and like pop it back out. It was so I used to say the front end was the crumple zone, the entirety of it. I sadly then found that out when someone pulled out of me in a T-junction, and the thing literally didn't look like a car anymore afterwards. But that's a whole other story. But Renault Clio 1.2 16 valve. That was the car at the time, and she got ragged, definitely.
First cars. But cool. Thanks for joining us anyway. Obviously, good luck with the season. If you do manage to get in, like you was talking about, obviously you won't be able to let us know just yet. But if it does come off, then you have to come back on. Hopefully, us fans will be able to come along. Hopefully, you never know what's going. But other than that, all good. Thanks for joining us.
Perfect. Cheers, mate. Appreciate it. Thanks for the question, and hopefully we'll chat soon.